Well, terrific Wednesday evening to you. And we want to thank you so much for allowing us into your homes on this really, really cool Wednesday evening. We're coming to you, of course, the National Communications Network, as well, the Voice of Guyana, 560 on the AM, 102.5 on the FM. This is a new program, of course. You would recognize that this is the first edition of the program. And I am Mark Watson. It's my pleasure to have with me the first edition, two sitting ministers, Senior Minister and Minister of Finance, the Honorable Dr. Ashni Singh is to my left, and to my right, I've got with me, for the first time actually, having a conversation with her, Minister of Tourism, Industry and Commerce, the Honorable Oneidge Walrond. And it is my pleasure to have you.
It's a pleasure to
be here. And I need to say Walrond-Allicock. And not forget that. I not forget that. So again, it's terrific to have you on this beautiful Wednesday evening. The main thrust of this conversation is to speak on some of the bills that will be appearing tomorrow in the National Assembly and make it simplified to our viewers and listeners, for them to understand, one, what the bill speaks to, two, the process, and finally, three, how they will benefit from it. In the conversation, there are a lot of other things that will come up to help them better understand where we are and how we got there, and why it is some of these bills are really coming to the House so that they could benefit in a holistic fashion. All right, so we've got the ball rolling, and we want to start with the first bill, which is one that Dr. Singh will deal with. And this is the Fiscal Management and Accountability Amendment Bill, and this is its second reading. Dr. Singh.
Thank you very much, Mark. And let me say, first of all, before I address the specific question of the bill, let me first of all congratulate you and NCN for taking the decision to introduce this series of programs, the Parliamentary Agenda, as it is titled. Like you quite rightly said in your introduction, the Parliament is conducting the business of the people.
Yes.
And it's extremely important that we translate what is occurring in the Parliament in language that is understood by the people whose business it is that we're transacting in the Parliament. And so I think it's really an extremely, potentially an extremely useful and important program, and I want to congratulate you for introducing it. Let me say too how privileged I am, and I'm sure I might speak on Minister Walrond's behalf as well, how privileged we are to have been invited to appear on this first edition of this important series of programs, this important program. In relation to the particular bill in question, the bill that you mentioned, the Fiscal Management and Accountability Amendment Bill, this bill seeks to introduce a few very simple amendments to the principal act, which is the Fiscal Management and Accountability Act. And if I might very briefly say what that act does. The Fiscal Management and Accountability Act is the act that governs the management of public finances in the country. So it's the act that manages the budget process, the process by which the budget is prepared. It's the act that governs the execution of the budget, that is to say how public monies are spent and recorded and how transactions are accounted for. It's the act that governs financial reporting in the government, so that's the accountability and transparency aspects, how you report on the financial transactions of the government. And so it essentially is, it's an extremely important piece of legislation, very comprehensive piece of legislation that governs the entire fiscal management cycle, or the entire public financial management cycle, from budget preparation to ex post reporting. During the time that we were in office previously, we had in fact brought this comprehensive piece of legislation to amend the original colonial legislation that we had inherited, what was then called the Financial Administration and Audit Act, which we had inherited from pre-independence times, an old colonial act which had governed the management of our public finances until 2003. And so we brought into law in 2003 this very comprehensive Fiscal Management and Accountability Act, and it served the country very well. It really modernized and transformed the financial management landscape in government in a very comprehensive and dramatic way. And indeed, I think everybody would agree that it has served the country very well. During the time that we were out of office, certain amendments were introduced. In fact, very early in the APNU AFC term in office, they introduced certain amendments to the Fiscal Management and Accountability Act. So there was an amendment bill that was taken to Parliament in 2015 that changed some aspects, a few particular aspects as it relates to the the financial management processes, specifically as it relates to constitutional bodies. And those amendments were brought into law and have been in operation since from 2015 until now, until 2020. But what we've observed and what has been experienced in the Parliament during the 5 years that these amendments, these amended provisions have been in operation, is that they've resulted in, the amendments that were introduced in 2015 resulted in a number of inefficiencies in the budget process. And in particular, it introduced a two-stage budget process which involved the budgets of the constitutional agencies going to Parliament first, in a first step, being considered by the Parliament in a first step, in isolation from the rest of the budget. And then when the Parliament had approved the budgets of those constitutional agencies, those budgets then got incorporated into the national budget, and the national budget went back to the Parliament. So first of all, it lengthened the budget process. But it also fragmented the budget process because it required the Parliament now to consider the budget in two separate bits. What I guess the best word that I can think of is fragmentation. So essentially the budget process was fragmented. And it therefore that itself, the fragmentation itself, introduced some inefficiencies, as has been documented in the parliamentary proceedings over the course of the 5 years, where in considering the budgets of these constitutional agencies, a number of parliamentarians expressed concerns about the fact that they were looking at a part of the budget and not the whole of the budget, and could not therefore make judgments in relation to the bit that they were being asked to pronounce on in isolation from the rest, because the budgetary process is essentially one that involves relative prioritization. And for you to make informed judgments about relative priorities, it's very important that you're considering the whole at one time. You take a holistic view of the budget. And so this fragmentation introduced that dysfunctionality. And it came up as an issue repeatedly in the budget process over the last 5 years. So what we're seeking to do is to amend that process, to now combine those two steps, synchronize. I would say combine the two steps into a single step that would therefore see the Parliament having a comprehensive view of the budget and therefore being able to make a better informed decision, because they're making a decision on the whole rather than on two parts at separate times. You ask how this, you said that one of the objectives of the program is for people to understand why this matters.
Yes.
Well, you know, the budget is essentially, like I said, a process of prioritization. You know, we have a certain level of public resources that's available to finance the operations of government, the interventions that government would like to introduce to benefit people. Of course, there are many competing calls on the public treasury. So there is need for investment in infrastructure, need for investment in social services, need to provide support to vulnerable people. You know, and there's a multitude of various things that we would like to deliver to the people of Guyana, many of which we have already committed to in our manifesto, and many of which we've already started to implement, some of which are new and that are now emerging. And what we would like to achieve is a process by which the Parliament is able to view in totality all of the proposals that we have for the budget and make a better informed set of decisions. And so what we believe the public will benefit from, or the advantage to be had from this amendment once it is enacted, is that you'll have a more comprehensive budget process, a single integrated comprehensive budget process, which will then lead to better informed budgetary decisions. And that can only lead to better outcomes.
So the intent is to expedite the process.
That is correct.
And you can't bring a budget, it's piece, you know, it is as they call it in local parlance, it's piece. You don't make you can't make decisions with, you know, on how money is being spent when you don't have the full picture, you know, you got to bring everything together. So, you know, the piecemeal way doesn't work, you know, it doesn't, you know, so as Dr.
So this will
Ashni
better
says.
serve the people at the end of the day.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Better serve the people.
It will enable the people's representatives to be able to have a more holistic view, the people's representatives on both sides of the House, to have a more holistic view of the budget as they're making decisions.
Correct. All right, thank you, Dr. Singh, on that one. We've got the first one up. I want to go to Tourism Minister on this particular bill, and this one is the Small Business Amendment Bill 2020, Bill number 13 of 2020. And so this relates directly to your ministry.
Yes.
Let's talk about it.
Yes. Well, the Small Business Bill of 2004 sought to provide a facility for the small business development and support, because we recognize that small business needed that, and that the fact that small businesses are also engines of growth in every economy, significant ones. And so the bill provided for a fund for small businesses to get a grant and a loan facility. The amendment sought to does several things. One, we found that there was a tendency for larger businesses to they found a loophole in the qualifications of what qualifies you for a small business, and there were three qualifications, three criteria, and you can the current regime, which is what the amendment is seeking now to remedy. You only need to satisfy two of those regimes. So, for example, the criteria are one, that you have to have less than 25 employees, that you have to have $20 million of total assets, and that your annual revenue less than 60 million. So, for instance, in a hypothetical situation, you have a small business that had 3 employees and $19 million of total assets, but $150 million in revenue. That under this regime, the current regime, the status quo, that business will qualify. But and a second business has in the same sector, same 3 employees, same $19 million in total assets, but $40 million in total revenues. Clearly less advantageous financial position. That business would satisfy all 3 criteria, but still has to compete against a business that has the larger budget. So the larger financial resources. So the idea was it creates a level playing field. You know, people will say that, okay, well, so what the amendment is doing is requiring that you fulfill all 3 of the criteria. People will say it's increasing bureaucracy, but it's in fact the effect, as in the example I just gave, is leveling the playing field. All persons, like for like, compete. One of the most significant things about the bill is that it brings into effect the 20% that it mandates that government services, goods and works 20% of that in procurement has to be given to a small business.
Okay.
And because there is the cry about these small businesses being drowned out and by larger companies, which is a reality. So for them to be able to compete, the Act amendment is now requiring that the 20% of the government goods and services, so the amendment is now including works, which is will be construction works and apart from just goods and services. So that is a significant movement, especially as government. We are contemplating major infrastructural projects in the future that small businesses can be able to compete and be able to participate and have piece of that pie as well. The amendment also removes from the minister the discretion to decide what is a small business, who is designated a small business, who qualifies, and places that in the council, the Small Business Council, which, when constituted according to the Act, will be people of various competencies and who are representative stakeholders, and that body is what will will decide if this person qualifies as a small business. And so what it does, it removes that political discretion, the temptation to say that it was politically motivated, and you have a council that is exercising its own independent discretion on who qualifies as a small business. And the small business, that designation has now been removed from the ministerial from a ministerial discretion. So I think that is pretty significant, because it speaks to commitment, the government's commitment to be transparent, that show that all, despite your political persuasion, all small businesses, once you qualify, you're entitled to the benefits that a small business will get, the grants and the ability to bid for government works and services, and that you are that despite your persuasion or wherever you are, our commitment is to build you up, support the small businesses despite who you are, to support development in Guyana.
Excellent.
So
and I needed to ask Dr. Singh, I'm going to come back to him on the first bill that we spoke of just now. But as it relates to your bill, what's the stakeholders, they must have been a consultation process. How spirited was the consultation for this particular bill? Because I rather suspect there would have been quite a number of persons giving their feedback on this particular bill, especially as it relates to the businesses that we've got at the outside.
Well, certainly, I cannot speak to the exact robustness of the consultation, because but I do know in my capacity as an attorney at law, and that the Procurement Commission, there was a spirited debate on the 20%. It was a policy decision that it was obviously going to the small businesses. The whole amendment came out of a cry from the small business stakeholders that we are being disadvantaged, and that the Act itself doesn't even include work, so we can't even bid to build a road or to build. It is just the big contractors who are able to do that. So definitely, it came. There was a robust discussion and consultation in relation to this bill, and all of the stakeholders contributed. Hence, we have such a progressive amendment.
Must have been spirited conversation. And I want to go back to Dr. Singh there on the first bill, the Fiscal Management and Accountability Amendment Bill. And I want to go back to the very question about the process, because sometimes when you've got the bills coming up, you've got motions being passed and brought up, especially at the first reading and the second reading. The story behind the subject many times is lost, and so the active involvement of stakeholders sometimes is hidden, not really spoken much of. This allows you to share that with us.
Sure.
Yeah.
So in this particular case, this bill really came out of the collective parliamentary experience. And so if you look at the parliamentary debate that has surrounded the budget process over the last 5 years, since the 2015 amendment was introduced, you observe a consistent pattern of concerns being expressed in the Parliament about the fragmentation of the approach. And so the bill really was informed by the collective experience of the Parliament over the last 5 years, and it seeks to cure a defect that was identified coming out of that parliamentary process.
Okay, okay. One of the things we want to mention, even as we continue with the conversation, and this would be a statement that the Vice President made just at the birth of the new government about the aggressive agenda that needs to be taken. And the fact that in the aggressive agenda, all and sundry will be consulted to make sure that the process is understood. But at the end of the day, the people on the ground understand, and they understand, and they know firsthand how they're going to benefit from this process. And so this is why we go to, what's happening with stakeholders, what was their response like, how spirited was the conversation or the conversations, and their expectations coming out of it. Let's talk about your partners, and this would be the opposition as you go forward with the bills. The consultation also speaks to their involvement. So one of the questions we would ask is the passage of this bill, the fiscal amendment bill, how long do you see it staying on the table, or how quickly do you see it being passed?
The expectation is that it's going to be debated tomorrow and voted on. Correct. Because it was tabled at the last sitting of Parliament. You'll see that it's coming up for the second reading,
yep.
Which essentially means that it's coming up for debate tomorrow. Yes. So it was tabled at the previous sitting. It's been in the hands of parliamentarians from the last sitting to now. It will be debated tomorrow, and my expectation is that a vote will be taken on it. Needless to say, my hope is and my expectation is that it will be passed, but it's going to be ventilated and debated fully tomorrow.
Correct. I want to go to the hire purchase bill, which is something I'm sure a lot of people are thinking of. Well, you know what? This is something I want to hear more about, and this goes back to our new tourism minister here. The hire purchase bill is one that I think will need some explaining, because people want to know how do they benefit from it. So we start there.
Yes. Well, Mark, I think the hire purchase bill is one of the most transformational bills that is going to affect every single Guyanese, every single court's buying, or not to mention one particular thing, but every seller that engages in the hire purchase arrangement, and it touches the bottom line of many Guyanese who just want to have access to contemporary contemporary necessities. Like washing machines and vacuum cleaners. Some people think that is not a necessity, but as a most housewives will beg to differ. They need a washing machine, and so those are big ticket items. And also the vehicles, a motor vehicle. As Guyana is expanding, we have large suburban areas. The commute coming into town to work. It's having a motorized vehicle, having a motorized motorcycles, those are all necessities. And most of us can only afford it on a hire purchase arrangement. And what we have found is that because of lack of the regulatory framework for these kinds of arrangements, that common people were being taken advantage of. The unsophisticated buyer was being taken advantage of. The housewife who doesn't know her rights and has offered no protection is being forced to almost paid most of her money on a washing machine or a vacuum cleaner or those items, being forced to with immediate repossession without notice. barge into your homes, take away your thing. A lot of onerous, unscrupulous people that have been affected. The Consumer and Competitions Affairs, we've had hundreds of complaints of these hire purchase arrangements that have been particularly has really taken advantage of the people, of the man in the street. And all of us, most of us, are going to be touched by this legislation because we all participate in the hire purchase arrangements at some point in our lives. And but it doesn't only protect, which it does, the consumer. It also protects the
business.
The business, yes, because the truth is you want your base, the sales are going to increase as more people have access to your products that they can't pay cash for. But ultimately, the conditions where the consumer and the seller not sure how much they're paying for an item. You know, you see signs like, you take this home for $1,000 a week, you know, it's yours. But no idea, you have no idea that you're paying twice for it over the years because you don't see the cash price. So what this legislation seeks to do is to mandate it for the seller to show what the cash price is for this item, to show what the higher purchase price is for it, so the buyer can easily do the math and see that, okay, this is twice the price, this is 3 times the price, and make that informed decision that, yes, I want to do this. And so it's no longer, the seller can no longer hide and put the price in secrecy of the item, the real price of the item, and have it shrouded in secrecy, and all kinds of language about interest, and and when you look at it's compound interest or the interest that is particularly onerous on the buyer. So all of the secrecy is actually, it's, if you don't disclose those prices, is actually on the penalty of law. It's a criminal penalty to if you do not comply with the law in terms of letting the people know. So I think that is significant, because a lot of it takes a lot of social strain, financial strain off of families, because you enter into these agreements and you're not quite sure what you're getting into. You know, it's full disclosure now. You have to say. And it even provides for a 7-day cooling off period, what we call. You go, you see something, you want to get it right away, you go, then you realize, if I really think about this, I really can't afford this thing. We have 7 days in which you can take it back, and the seller has to accept it back from the buyer, because we've all been there. Buyer's remorse. You take it home, it's like, no, I really shouldn't have done this. And I think that's the significant. It's a significant measure for a lot of the buyers who are just unsophisticated and haven't quite thought through. So they are given the opportunity of 7 days in which to cancel the entire arrangement.
I think that's very important, especially as it relates to leveling the playing field. But understand that not only the person that is making the purchase, but the manufacturer or the business has a responsibility.
Yeah.
And he is bound by the legislation, which after being enacted, there is absolutely no recourse.
In fact, Mark, if I may, this is an important part of, it might not immediately be obvious, but it's an important part of the modernization that we're speaking about. So modernization, you're seeing new roads and new hotels and so on being built, and those are all important elements of modernization. But there are other very critical aspects of modernization. And if you think about it, buying on credit is a staple aspect of life in most modern and advanced societies. You just have to turn on your television and you see everything being sold on credit. No down payment, $100 every month for 36 months, with the effective interest rate published. You know, you turn on your television, you go on the internet, and you see things all manner of things, constantly being advertised for sale on credit arrangements, from motor cars, literally everything. And so as we go through this rapid phase of modernization that we're about to embark on as a society and as an economy, inevitably the potential for buying and selling on credit will increase dramatically. People are going to want, disposable incomes are going to be increasing, people are going to want to acquire more, you know, these the items that Oneidge referred to.
For the comfort.
They, you know, want to be more comfortable in their daily lives. They will want to acquire some assets or some other items for their, you know, their homes or whatever. And the potential for them to do those transactions on credit might exist, except that the credit transaction might not occur in the absence of a sound legal framework to protect both buyer and seller. There are many sellers who right now only sell on cash because they are concerned about the protections and the predictability of credit transactions because of the absence of a modern legal framework.
So there's a lack of confidence.
There's there's just, I mean, lots of sellers potentially who just adopt a cautious approach because they're not, you know, there isn't really a modern legal framework to govern credit transactions, and so they insist if you can't pay cash up front, I'm not interested in doing business with you. There are lots of buyers similarly who perhaps hesitate to enter credit transactions because they're worried about the things like that Minister Walrond mentioned, and worried about somebody's going to come and grab their item and take it away from them if they miss a payment by a day or whatever it is. And so as we become increasingly a more modern society, which is unavoidably going to be a society that is going to be characterized with more modern ways of doing business, including doing business on credit, including doing business on hire purchase, it's important that we have a sound and modern legal framework to facilitate those transactions and to encourage more people to be able to do such transactions, but in a predictable environment governed by modern legislation.
Correct. If we can go a little deeper, Minister Singh, as it relates to, and you have been around for a while working on budgets. I know this 2020 is a brand new year, and we are looking forward to another budget soon on the cards. I guess it probably might be amateur, but of course I'm going to probe the question. Do you have a date that you're working with for that budget?
Well, we do have an indicative date that we are working towards. I mean, I've said it publicly already. We're aiming for early February. We're now in early February. So the budget is definitely going to be concluded during the course of February. I expect in the first 2 or 3 weeks of February. So we're on course. We're still working. Obviously, it involves quite a lot of work. We're engaged with a number of stakeholders. We've met with a number of stakeholders already, and we're proposing to meet with a much wider range of stakeholders. Those meetings will be happening very shortly. And then we're going to be proceeding to continue to do work on the budget with a view to concluding it. But it's going to happen within weeks.
Okay. As we continue on that as well, I know that for you, the talks are continuing with stakeholders, and you've got your teams out. What's the feedback like? I know the last budget was quite extensive, and it dealt with quite a number of areas, even though that was really dealing with the latter end of 2020. But I know for 2021, given the trust and the rate at which the development that the government is taking the nation, I rather suspect that there are quite a lot of things that will come under this big umbrella. Well,
the 2021 budget is going to be a little bit different from the 2020 budget, because the 2020 budget was correctly styled or correctly described as an emergency budget for a number of reasons. First of all, it came very late in the fiscal year because of the political events that transpired during the course of 2020. So the budget, you would recall, went to Parliament, I think, in September, after 2/3 of the fiscal year would have already elapsed. And coming as late as it did, it was prepared in a very compressed time frame. You would recall that as soon as President Irfan Ali assumed office, he immediately issued instructions that work should commence on the budget. And literally within a matter of just a few days, I think it was in the first week, the budget circular had been issued. And literally within just a few more weeks, the budget was presented to Parliament. And that budget delivered immediate interventions designed to bring instant relief to people who were under severe pressure as a result of COVID, and also, of course, as a result of the political events of 2020. And amongst those measures was, of course, the reversal of many of the punitive taxes, things like VAT on water and electricity and so on. Those things were all reversed. So Budget 2020 was very much an emergency budget, delivering immediate relief in a crisis situation late in the fiscal year. So Budget 2021 really is the first full year budget of this government's current term in office. And so Budget 2021 is going to have a very strong medium-term orientation. So it's going to be very forward-looking. We will use the opportunity of Budget 2021 to outline the critical aspects of the government's medium-term agenda and initiate a lot of the initiatives and projects that are important elements of that medium-term agenda. So in that regard, it's going to be it's going to sort of take a long view of things, look down the road, articulate what it is that we'd like to achieve during this term of office, set out the vision, if you like, or elaborate the vision, because of course the vision has already been set out in the manifesto, which we consider to be our contract with the people of Guyana. That's the basis on which we were elected. So for us, delivering on our manifesto commitments is our paramount priority. And the vision has already been outlined, and critical elements of the vision have already been outlined in many of the President's speeches and Vice President's speeches by various ministers, etc. But what we will try to do is to sort of bring these together, these various elements that have been outlined at various times, and articulate the medium-term agenda for the government. Okay. And then, of course, Budget 2021 will initiate a number of the critical projects that are essential to the realization of the government's medium-term agenda.
Okay. I know quite well that you're not going to want to go a little too deep on some of those matters, and I respect that. But as we continue on the parliamentary agenda, there are quite a number of things that, as Finance Minister, you face it, and as Tourism Minister. We're going to come across to Minister Walrond in just a second. But the economy, obviously, with COVID and all the challenges, the economic downturn, the spiral, some nations already, we've seen them really buckle under pressure. Guyana's got agriculture still supporting us very well. We've got oil and gas still under the umbrella of the parliamentary agenda. Some of the new emerging industries, especially oil and gas, and there are quite a number of others that are coming out of that. I rather suspect that in your discussions, those things are being paid keen attention to right now.
Well, absolutely. I mean, the economy of Guyana is going to go through some very important structural changes over the course of the next 5-10 years and beyond. But certainly in the immediate, I would say over the course of the next 5 years, you're going to see some very significant changes in the structure of the economy. Most significantly, like you quite rightly said, in the productive sector, you're going to see some very dramatic shifts. Some of these are obvious. Oil and gas is now a very important contributor to the economy and to aggregate output in the economy. So, of course, we're going to see oil and gas assuming an important place in the productive landscape. With oil and gas, of course, comes all of the support services and ancillary services that accompany an oil and gas industry, including things like logistics, transport and handling, other services and you're seeing some of that already. But we have been constantly at pains to say that we want to make sure that our economy remains a strongly diversified economy, because we believe that a widely diversified economy is a more resilient economy, is a stronger economy. And we have seen that if you look around the world, you've seen that, you know, the economies that have withstood the pressures of time and the pressures of volatility in commodity prices are the economies that are diversified, and the economies that have displayed greater vulnerability or greater volatility are the economies whose productive sector are more heavily concentrated in a single sector. And so if you're an economy that's dominated by oil and gas, or by oil, for example, when oil prices are doing very well, you do very well. When oil prices are doing badly, you do very badly. And, you know, there's so many examples around the world of countries that, you know, face this challenge. You know, there was a time when we faced this challenge when one commodity or two commodities, you know, were dominant in our productive landscape. So there was a time when one or two commodities literally dominated. So if that particular commodity did very well, the entire economy did relatively well. If that particular commodity did badly, the economy had encountered challenges. And even during the time that we were in office previously, we worked very hard at that time to diversify the productive basis, and we made a lot of progress in that regard. And you saw that progress. You saw other sectors emerging. Going forward, because we feel so strongly about ensuring a diversified economy, we've said very clearly, the President has said very clearly, and the mandate and instructions that he's given to all of his ministers is to ensure a diversified productive sector. And if I might very briefly mention just a couple of examples, for a long time Guyana's potential as a producer of food, of agricultural and food products has been heralded. You know, a lot has been said about Guyana being the food basket of the Caribbean. For a long time we've been speaking about the Caribbean having a food import bill in excess of $4 billion US, and the fact that Guyana can meet, you know, a lot of that food import bill for the region. But that potential is yet to be realized. We intend to ensure that that potential is realized, and so you're going to see agricultural production, or agriculture rather, playing a very important part in the productive landscape, not just our traditional products or our traditional crops, but also new and emerging and non-traditional crops increasingly playing a role. And, you know, that's from the point of view not only of, I mean, in the first instance, taking advantage of the opportunities presented by oil and gas, because now there's increased domestic demand with international companies buying and you know, supplying to the FPSOs and so on and so forth. So there's some immediate opportunities, but we see some bigger medium and longer term opportunities, including, like I said, realizing our potential to be the main suppliers of food products to the region, and increasing our share of exports to, you know, wider afield. So agriculture is going to be extremely important, and we will continue to place very strong emphasis on agriculture. Of course, agriculture also supports, you know, the livelihoods of literally tens of thousands of people. If I might mention just one other example, and there are many examples that I could give, but I know our time is limited. Tourism has been another sector that for a long time we've been hearing about Guyana's remarkable, unique potential for tourism, our remarkable flora and fauna, our remarkable natural the beauty of our rainforest, ecotourism, beautiful waterfalls, beautiful resorts in the interior, beautiful rivers and creeks and ranches and resorts and so on. And I mean, anybody who's traveled around Guyana has seen this phenomenal potential. We have been getting some tourists, but not nearly as many as we could potentially get. Now that Guyana has greater visibility on the international arena, you have far more business travelers coming into Guyana, getting to know Guyana. You have, and we've worked very hard over the years, particularly while we were in office previously, to get more international airlines coming to Guyana, and more will be coming to Guyana. We're in a situation now where we believe that once we ensure that we put in place the right policy environment, that you'll see a remarkable growth in tourism. And I mean, Minister Walrond is here, and I'm sure she could elaborate on this. She's the minister responsible for tourism.
Yeah.
I'm sure she can. I mean, you've seen the stories of the number of hotels who have expressed an interest in establishing a presence in Guyana, including some really big international names. And so all the signs are that tourism is going to also be another very important source of economic activity going forward.
Yeah. And we want to give a final words to Minister Walrond here on commerce and industry as well. These are two particular sectors that really, once given the support, can really blossom over.
Yes, absolutely. In terms of our industrial development, we have already start to revitalize the industrial parks that have laid dormant, the ones in Belvedere and Collagen, and we're looking, we'll be looking to even more, it drives economic activity, drives the soft manufacturing, promotes that, that is, we plan to, and the agenda is to keep, pushing that and then laying that agenda. That had laid dormant for a while, that particular route of development, which is inviting people to get involved in small and soft manufacturing. And we hope, and as Dr. Singh mentioned, the agriculture, to encourage more agro-processing and more of those products that come out of our agricultural industry sector. And so as part of industry, we are pushing for a lot of that, and we're getting a lot of interest. A lot of interest, a lot of proposals. People are serious about doing business in our, and they're just looking for the support that the government has undertaken to provide for the industrial parks, the areas that are zoned, and we will continue to facilitate that as the industrial part of the ministry.
I know just last year, Guyana won the coveted crown for ecotourism, which was really terrific for your ministry. And I'm sure as we move on, even as we talk about the parliamentary agenda, that tourism is one area, while some territories have suffered, and of course our tourism and hospitality people have taken a hit because of the challenges of COVID and all of that. Nevertheless, the potential is great. Yes. As we move forward.
We're particularly poised to recover faster because our tourism product is one that is safe in terms of COVID, and the open spaces, small groups are traveling, so you could travel with your bubble, and we moved to the large ranches and open spaces, and so we don't have the large person intensive, large spaces. Our tourism product is not like thousands come on a cruise ship. Yeah. It's, you come with your family, yes, you come with your small groups, you go birding, you go, you go up the creeks, and you go hiking, all with your bubble. So we are particularly poised to revitalize, and we've already made steps to revitalize those tours and the products in the different regions, because we can do so safely. We can enjoy Guyana's tourism products very safely with your bubble in the meantime. Yeah.
Quickly, in coming up to, of course, wrap-up time, I can't believe the time has gone so fast, but we're having fun. The time does go pretty quickly, but tomorrow is very important as it relates to dealing with the business of the nation, bills that will be put before the House. And I thank you so much for speaking on those bills that relate to you as we move forward with an aggressive agenda to develop this country. Closing words, Minister Singh.
Well, once again, thank you very much, Mark, again, like I said, for inviting us on this program. Like you said, there are a number of very important legislative items coming up tomorrow. Regrettably, time didn't allow us to speak about all of them.
Correct.
There is also the order to confirm the EU CARIFORUM Economic Partnership Agreement, which is an important initiative and which is, very critical to ensuring continuity of access to preferential markets in the in the United Kingdom following the UK's exit from Brexit. following the UK's exit from the EU,
EU.
as a result of Brexit. We didn't get a chance to speak at length about that. And there are also two critical orders that are going to be confirmed in relation to the ceiling on debt. Here again, these are both very, very critical.
Yeah, you can close off with that.
Well, we'll have to do this relatively quickly because I see the clock is ticking. But there are two orders before the National Assembly tomorrow to increase the ceiling on domestic and external debt. These orders have a particular genesis. First of all, when we came into office, as you know, it took us some time to ascertain the state of the public finances. And once we had taken stock or started to take stock of the public finances, one of the things that we discovered was, in fact, that there was quite a lot of indebtedness that had been accumulated by the APNU AFC government that was not being recorded as debt. So, for example, there was a very substantial overdraft that was accumulated at the central bank, which really should not have been accumulated at the central bank and now needs to be remedied or needs to be regularized. And so the mere act of regularizing the indebtedness that had been accumulated at the central bank through the overdraft and other aspects of indebtedness, like, for example, what we call contingent liabilities, borrowing by entities outside of government, but borrowing that is guaranteed by government, which means that there's a contingent claim on government. When you take stock of all of those liabilities and contingent liabilities, the ceiling on domestic debt that was in law would in fact have been violated. And so we need, first of all, to remedy that. But in addition to remedying that, we also need to create space to finance future borrowing in the next few years to finance the various initiatives that we have outlined that will be in Budget 2021 and indeed, in the next couple of years. And so the revision to the ceilings on debt are really to serve two purposes. One, to address the need to regularize the inherited stock of indebtedness that is not currently reflected as debt formally. And secondly, to allow some room for new borrowing to finance the developmental initiatives that we have committed to implementing. So those are two other important items. I'd be happy, I'll be speaking on these tomorrow, but I'll be happy maybe on a subsequent occasion if you would like me to elaborate further on why this is important and why it matters to people and so on.
Yeah, most certainly. And again, we want to thank you for coming and simplifying some of the matters that would be mind-boggling for, of course, our friends on the outside, those that are following us on the Voice of Guyana and on National Communications Network. It was my distinct pleasure to have you. And so let's do this again at another convenient time. The Honorable Oneidge Walrond, Minister of Tourism, Industry and Commerce, and Senior Minister of Finance, the Honorable Dr. Ashni Singh. Thank you again. This has been the Parliamentary Agenda. My name is Mark Watson. Do take care and enjoy the evening. Goodbye.